Welcome back to FANSPLAINED, a media criticism podcast with Ryan and Em. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Em.
We're continuing our deep dive analysis into the Marvel Cinematic Universe with a watch of each part of the MCU and the extended multiverse. In this episode, we'll be looking at the second and, unfortunately, final season of Marvel's Agent Carter. Season 2 was initially released January through March of 2016 in the mid-season break of Season 3 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. With the prior release of Captain America Civil War, as well as the abrupt cancellation after the end of Agent Carter's second season here, this has been seen by some as a quiet retirement of Peggy Carter's character, and in some ways, S.H.I.E.L.D. with her. Marvel's Agent Carter Season 2, like its preceding season, was produced both by ABC Studios and Marvel Television. The second season brought with it some significant changes in terms of the show's format, length, cast, tone, and even its overall aesthetic. It gives us a setting change to Los Angeles, which was a move of practicality on the production end as the show was always filmed in California, and this shift allowed for less spend on making it look like Manhattan. The show also begins to make decisions aligned with practicality and simplicity in production, such as repeat appearances of multiple writers and directors among Season 2's expanded length of 10 episodes to Season 1's 8. We'll get to more on these changes as we tackle each aspect of Season 2 of Agent Carter, but this is definitely the part of the series in which we see exactly what not too much of a period piece looks like when it comes to something that benefited from its heavy period dating. Story sharing part of the MCU formula from the beginning aside, this is where the aesthetic also begins to fall more in line with Marvel's aesthetic formula, especially when it comes to pre-Disney Plus outings.
Yeah, where the other one actually looked more like a well-funded miniseries. This one, I mean, not all of it looks bad, but it definitely looks more like a television show versus what Season 1 looked like.
Yeah, Season 1 was very much a precursor to Disney Plus shows looking like movies.
Yeah.
Aside from certain outings, and we'll get to those when we get to those. But Season 2 definitely looks very much more like this is an ABC television show.
Yeah, it definitely looks and feels that way, though. It still had some things that surprised me in terms of, like, tone and violence, but for the most part, it did not have a lot of the same things that made Agent Carter Season 1 so special, it feels like.
Yeah, like, it still looked nice.
Yeah.
The production value wasn't cheap. It was just lackluster in comparison to, like, the coming out swinging of Season 1.
Yeah, and a lot of the noir aesthetic, a lot of the lighting and the visuals, I do appreciate that they gave Peggy more costumes. I appreciate they did actually have some really nice camera work, but then some of it kind of got a little too, hokey, I guess is the word.
We'll get to that when we get down to cinematography for sure. I have some notes on that, but yeah, it's very much the first time it starts feeling a lot more like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in tone almost, where you can tell it's a TV show, you can tell the budget's different, you can tell the intent is different.
When part of what made Agent Carter Season 1 so good was the fact that it was not like the rest of Marvel.
Right.
It wasn't like Captain America, but it wasn't like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It wasn't like the other Marvel outings. It was really its own thing, and it felt like it really reveled in that.
Yeah.
It benefited from that.
This one gets the length is expanded from 8 episodes to 10, but and I'll get to that later on its length and everything, but the plot ends up being a lot more complex, but at the same time the feeling of it is completely different.
It's complex in the sense that it's very convoluted. That's what it is.
It's very Marvel.
I would argue that it's actually way too convoluted compared to most Marvel stories, because this one tries so hard to have gotcha moments when it really didn't need to try that hard.
Yeah, we'll get to that later as well. But I mean, you can even see that in the summary of this one, where like I could sum up the first season in a paragraph, quick and easy, right? But the summary of season 2 is a little more involved. So Marvel's Agent Carter season 2 brings us back to the story of Peggy Carter's career in the pre-SHIELD SSR. This season is set in early 1947, approximately 6 months following the finale of season 1. In the aftermath of Leviathan's shakeup of the SSR, the organization has been split into separate branches on each coast of the United States, with Jack Thompson taking on the mantle of chief in the New York branch and Daniel Souza taking on the same role in Los Angeles. Souza is introduced to a baffling case of bizarre murders and calls into Thompson for more skilled backup from the more established New York office, because we're given a Los Angeles that has just branched off. Yeah. And so Souza's had to hire everyone himself.
Yeah, they're just now making it, they're just now trying to cover both coasts with this organization, versus it just being solely based in New York.
Right. But with how bizarre these murders are, he needs someone a little more seasoned than his rookie staff, because he doesn't have the seasoned New York staff.
Well, that, and he also is settled with, some more than questionable LAPD people.
Yeah. That is very true. Thompson, on the other hand, is feeling insecure with Peggy's capable presence still in his own office, because of course he is.
What a Chad.
Chad.
And
sensing an opportunity to cause some drama with Souza, he sends Agent Carter to assist in the LA murder case. In the meantime, Howard Stark has also moved to Los Angeles to establish Stark Pictures in Hollywood, putting Carter back into a partnership with Stark's faithful butler Edwin Jarvis. Investigations into the involvement of Isodyne Energy's... I said involvement in there twice. Investigation into Isodyne Energy's involvement in one of the victims of the string of deaths, aka one of their former employees, brings Team Carter into contact with an overambitious wannabe Senator Calvin Chadwick, who owns Isodyne Energy, and his movie star wife, Whitney Frost, with fame equivalent to the best actresses of both Agent Carter's age and those of our own. Whitney Frost is basically this show's version of Hedy Lamarr, who was an actress who invented the computer, but was also like a very widely known movie star.
I also just realized that she did resemble quite a bit of Emma Frost.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
Yeah, she did. The irony. We'll get to the irony of that one later, too.
I just realized that. Just, without the telepathy and all that.
However, not even evidence of Isodyne's involvement on owner Chadwick's behalf could prepare Team Carter for the real darkness behind the scenes of these mysterious deaths, Isodyne Energy's true motives, nor the connection of these motives to the power behind the machinations of the government's largest agencies and events, including the SSR itself, the Council of Nine. In attempted atomic tests gone wrong, Isodyne has unwittingly discovered zero matter, a substance with lethal power in the wrong hands and dire side effects to everyone who comes into contact with it. AKA, this is a lot more convoluted while having similar plot pieces to previous MCU. Not My Chemical Romance. MCU, please.
I mean, we've been waiting for them to do their own thing, and we're still waiting, Gerard. Still waiting.
Well, he writes comic books. Like, come back, man. So, we're gonna get into more of the actual production of Agent Carter now that we've gone through the bare bones summary, and it is a very bare bones summary. Season 2...
That's really the only way to sum it up, honestly, is to make it bare bones. Because if you try to get into the weeds with it, it's like...
We would have had to do it episode by episode.
Yeah.
And yet, that would have felt its length even harder than it already has.
Yes. When we said we wanted more Agent Carter, this isn't what we meant.
No, it's not what anybody meant. Season 2 of Marvel's Agent Carter takes a different approach from the first season, both in writing and direction. Season 1 had different writers and directors on each episode, all reporting into the show-running team to maintain consistency. In Season 2, we see 5 different directors take on 2 episodes each. So you have 5 directors, and each one takes on subsequent episodes. So the first director would take on the first 2, the next director would take on 3, 4, and so on. And then writing is not as formulaic as the directing is, but you do see a lot of the writers actually coming back where you didn't have that on the first season at all. All of the episodes were written by different people. This one has not only returning writers from other projects, such as the writer from the one shot, but you see writers from certain episodes returning to later episodes.
Which, I mean, that's, like I said in another episode, we don't typically have the same writers or even directors on a lot of the same episodes when it comes to TV shows. It's very rare, and I've only seen it start to take on more regularity with, like, well, Marvel stuff, actually. And some of the, what were you calling it? The golden primetime TV? Golden TV era.
Oh, what was I calling it? Oh, no. There's a term for it, and I'm blanking.
It started with Rome. Rome was the reason that we have the kind of
right.
TV shows we do today.
Prestige TV.
Prestige
that,
TV.
I'm like, I know there's a term for this specific type of, like, movie budget mini-series kind of thing. You know, with, like, Game of Thrones, where they were only 10 episodes each season, stuff like that.
Yeah, versus your typical episodes of, like, Law and Order or something.
The irony, and I'll get to that one later, too. Yeah, but on one hand, it offers us more consistency because we do see people returning. On the other hand, it doesn't quite feel consistent from season to season.
No.
Internally, the season feels relatively consistent in and of itself. It's not like one episode goes completely out, completely into the outfield and everyone else kind of has to pick up and figure out why they did that. It's not the Star Wars sequel trilogy.
Ooh, shots fired.
Said it. But on the other hand, you can tell that there are development changes from season 1 to season 2 because the show very much changes.
Yes.
So direction gives us, or introduces us to Lawrence Trilling, David Platt, Craig Zisk, Metten Husen, and Jennifer Getzinger in respective order. According to the filmography of all the talent involved, there's a reason why season 2 feels more like a token television production than the previous season. Trilling and Zisk are both known for previous directorial work on shows such as Felicity, Alias, and Scrubs.
Oh, God.
They both worked on separate episodes of this.
That explains a lot.
Zisk has also had experience with Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Parks and Recreation, and you can absolutely see that in the injected humor.
Yes, that's what I meant. I could definitely tell. There's way more. I mean, sometimes the comedy is a good thing, sometimes it lands, and other times it seems a little too silly for Agent Carter.
There's one specific part, and I don't remember which episode it was in. They were running a mission to disarm, like, atomic warheads, and Jarvis got stuck in the room and had to do it.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I completely understand him being nervous about it. I'd be nervous about it. Any normal person, even with experience, would be nervous about it. But there's a difference between him being nervous about it and him being hit over the head for comic relief a little too hard when it didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It kind of undermined some of the gravity of the situation up until they kind of got him through it and then they leveled it out. But up until that point, it was like that weird injected Marvel, like, one-liner humor that doesn't always quite land because it's not always written that well and it's not always timed that well.
When it's written well, it's written well and it lands and it's genuinely funny. Other times, quite a few times, it's just, it's flatter than Kansas. It's like, nope.
Yeah,
Nope.
and this show definitely does try for more humor, which subsequently means that some of it is going to land and more of it is going to fail because there's more of it in there to not land in the first place.
I feel like in that scene in particular, it would have been better if Jarvis had tried to keep his composure and tried to play it straight, and then as soon as he comes out of the room, he's like looking like he's about to shit his pants. You know?
Yes.
Like that.
We're 15 minutes in. There we go. Every time. We're about 15 minutes in.
I managed to drop it. But yeah, that's what I mean. That would have been funnier.
They did kind of have that moment, but again, that's undermined by them doing the initial, like, trying to go, ha, the door won't open. Just open the door, guys. This is such a funny joke kind of stuff. It evokes those franchises that just try and hit the comic relief just a little too hard. I didn't hate that there was an injection of levity in it. I really enjoy that, actually.
Yeah, there were a lot of comedic scenes that were actually really funny, and it felt not only that it complemented the tone of it, like especially in contrast to the seriousness of some of the stuff they were doing, but it also felt fitting for films from that era where they could have genuinely silly or, you know, a lot of physical comedy involved. Again, a lot of that stuff would land because it was genuinely funny.
I always come back to that scene in Manfredi's diner with his grandmother where they're eating lunch.
Yes.
And Peggy and Jarvis or Peggy and Sousa?
It's
Peggy and
Sousa.
Sousa are having the fight outside in, like, the public-facing
Yes.
diner. And then Manfredi looks over and sees them having beaten up all his goons sitting outside the door. And then you have that conversation between Manfredi and his grandmother and Peggy and Sousa. And I really, like, that's humor that really landed for me. And I was really afraid it was going to just be a complete caricature.
Yeah, like an Italian-American caricature. No, it actually
like Goodfellas turned up to, like, 99.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they managed to do pretty good, especially when, you know, his Nuna grabbed the knife and tried to stab so.
What do you have? A knife? No!
No, Nuna, no. Don't do that.
I actually really enjoyed Manfredi a lot, and I didn't think I was going to.
I didn't either. Especially because his introduction was like... It literally was Joe Pesci's character in Goodfellas turned up to, like, 20.
Well, there's a reason you're gonna like that, too, and I'll get to it.
Uh-oh.
So I talked about Zisk, I talked about Trilling. So Platt, who's director of 3 and 4, brings experience from extensive work on Law and Order and Law and Order SVU.
Well.
And that's why you get a lot more of, like, the bureaucracy tones.
Yeah, and the TV show feel of it.
Mm-hmm. And then Hughesen, I have no idea if I'm saying that right. I think so. Hughesen and Getzinger both share experience in working on Outlander. But then also Hughesen has worked on other fantasy and comic adaptation material such as Krypton, BBC Merlin, and American Gods.
I'm glad they didn't, you know, rely so heavily on the slow-mo like they did in that one.
Yeah, he's also a what was it? He's like a Turkish director of mixed descent, so that's why I'm pretty sure I am butchering his surname, unfortunately. But he's also worked on other TV, but he's worked on more prestige TV than previous directors had to that point. And then Getzinger is probably the most decorated out of everyone. She's done extensive script doctoring on top of directing, and her script doctoring has assisted with projects such as The Prophecy. Yes, that movie.
With Christopher Walken?
Yes.
That weird fucking angel movie.
I love that movie so much.
Oh my god.
Phantoms, Requiem for a Dream,
Ugh.
The Sopranos. That's why you like it.
That does explain it.
And Mad Men. And then she made her directorial debut with Mad Men. Which is why the finale starts feeling a lot more like Agent Carter than a lot of the rest of it.
Yeah.
Because it does. Like, once you get to about halfway through the series, or season, it starts to pick up a little bit more of the noir tone, where the first half of it just doesn't have it at all. But it's still very few and far between, and Los Angeles is still just very bright.
Yes.
And it's gonna be, it's LA, and, like, even, like, the LA Noire video game, aside from its, like, very intentional, like, black and white flashbacky moments to things, it's still very, very bright and colored, and it's LA.
I also got, during one black and white scene, for some reason it was making me think of the Twilight Zone, like the original one.
Yeah, it's the very beginning of Peggy's dream sequence, I believe.
Yeah.
Because that's the one that pulls in the most noir aspects, actually.
Where I was like, I swear to God, if they walk out of Ron Sterling, I think it was.
I don't know.
Who hosted the original one.
Mm-hmm.
If they walk someone out like that, with that similar voice, I was gonna lose my shit.
Do. Don't DMCA me.
You have entered a realm.
Twilight Zone.
You have entered a realm unlike any other. Peggy Carter's dream world.
Yes. So Getzinger has also worked on other television shows in a directorial capacity, such as Orange is the New Black, which is why I think we get a lot of, like, the Dottie Peggy stuff. Season 1, I believe it might have been more than that, but at least season 1 of Jessica Jones. Westworld. And How to Get Away with Murder. So she's also done a lot of prestige TV. The showrunners, Michelle Fizakis and Tara Butters, along with returning producer Chris Dingus, also trade off companion story-by-script credits for the final 2 episodes. So, the 2 showrunners would have, like, a story-by credit on, like, episode 9, and then Chris would have, like, written the script for episode 9, and then they'd switch for episode 10. I might have that backwards, but regardless, like, the pair of them has, like, either a story by credit or they have the script credit, and then the other one has the story by credit and the script credit on the opposite episode.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's how they made the finale feel like a 2-parter finale, because it really does.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, actually, a lot of the episodes that you're saying, like, each of these directors did, like, 2 episodes each.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like a lot of the show runs like that, where a lot of these the 2 episodes are joined, and it feels like they're all 2-parters. It's
a really good thing that we actually cut off when we did, because when we were trying to back watch it, I originally intended to get through episode 5 and then pick back up on 6, but we ended up ending on 4 and then picking back up on 5 and marathoning the rest of the show in a night. So we actually ended with one director and jumped to the next one, rather than cutting in the middle of one director's 2 episodes.
Yeah.
And we did that unwittingly, but it worked out.
Yeah.
So, on the original conception of Season 2, Marcus and McFeely, who were the writers of Captain America, they're the ones that have handled most of the Captain America movies. They handled the pilot for Agent Carter, handled the at least the concept and production of the one-shot. They're the Captain America guys, basically. Said that they had a backstory in mind for Peggy that they weren't able to fit into Season 1. And we do see that across a couple different episodes.
Yes.
And Butters, who also was one of the showrunners, they were, Fizakis and Butters were also the showrunners of Season 1, so they've been the showrunners consistently through the whole thing. Said that the extended length of Season 2, while it wouldn't allow for any standalone episodes, and again, when you have directors who are doing, like, companion episodes, you're probably not really going to have standalone episodes.
Yeah.
They said that the length wouldn't really allow for any single episode to stand on its own anyway, but said that the format allowed for more character because we can have more personal stories built into the framework of the overall arching mystery, as well as stating that Season 2 would initially aim to expand upon Angie Martinelli's character from Season 1. One of these things was successful, the other was not.
Yeah, I'm like,
So what happened is they kept trying to write in more of this Peggy having a night out with the girls kind of stuff.
Yeah.
but would find that it would stall out the plot to have Peggy consistently, like, stopping, going to visit with Angie, and then getting back to the mystery kind of stuff. And it didn't really do a service to Angie's character. It kind of sidelined her. It broke the pacing of everything else because you were constantly stopping just to insert Angie's character, which is why they initially moved on to add an expanded role for Rose and gave Anna Jarvis a character rather than Angie, who I believe probably would have had more of an expanded role in season 3 if we'd gotten to see it.
Yeah.
But we didn't, so we only end up with Angie in a glorified cameo in like a 5-minute musical sequence.
Yeah.
To be fair, she does get to sing, and she is like the main character of Peggy's dream sequence.
Yeah.
People think it's Sousa. It's not. It's Angie. And it gets really bi-coded. Like, really bi-coded. Yes. Both with Angie and Dottie. The whole song is supposed to be framed on Peggy choosing between another introduced character as a love interest and Daniel. But it doesn't quite feel like that because you also have Dottie going, "I'll always be in your head." And then there's the specific moment when Angie is singing at Peggy and they look like they're about to kiss. Like, I kid you not.
Or she looks like she's begging Peggy to pick her.
Right.
So you have Angie who looks like she wants to make out with Peggy. You have Dottie who looks like she wants to make out and torture Peggy.
Okay, Dottie's already made out with Peggy.
Well,
Dottie's been there.
Make out more then.
Right.
You have Daniel and Jason who have been trying to make out with Peggy, and then you have Anna and Jarvis who both look like they're really into Peggy too. So yeah.
And Howard making sort of advances at Peggy at the same time.
So yeah, this is why during this whole sequence I was like, Peggy Carter is a bisexual menace.
She absolutely is.
She is just making everybody in the yard want her milkshake.
Basically.
Yes.
But yes, this is why we basically have Angie relegated to a cameo in Peggy's beauty school dropout sequence.
Beauty school dropout with less pink wigs.
Yeah, it's very similar to, choose what you're going to do. You have to decide what you're going to do with your life. Yeah, you got to make a decision.
And you have to decide for yourself. You can't let other people tell you what to do.
It's got, like, the similar, like, character cameos in your dream thing. Mm-hmm. It's got the similar sort of existential crisis of self.
Yes.
It's a very odd sequence, and I immediately thought of Grease, even though Grease is set in the 1950s. Or early 60s. I think it's the 50s, though, isn't it? I don't remember.
I've always thought it was like the late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah. It's very much the American Bandstand era. It's a generation after Peggy, regardless.
Yeah, and I mean, and the way that it's handled, it is handled very 1940-ish. It's very much a product of that time.
Yeah, it's very much like a Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire kind of number, which I also really appreciated. Yeah, and I didn't feel like it. I don't feel like it actually ruined the tone too much.
No.
But that is why we see such a small role from Angie.
The irony being, it's like, oh, well, if we did that, it would just distract from the plot. But it's like, guys, the fucking plot felt really long and drawn out regardless.
Yeah, there were a lot of points when it dragged out just a we could have cut it back down to 8 episodes and probably had it be tighter as a result. There were just a few too many side plots and a few too many, like, heel face turns. To the point where I'm like, okay, we've already done this 5 times this season.
5 times. You can't keep, double crossing, triple crossing, quadruple crossing.
Right.
Like, stop it already. We get it.
So, with that, Marvel's Agent Carter Season 2 sees the return of Haley Atwell, James Darcy, and Ver Jokai, Chad Michael Murray, and Bridget Regan in their fairly central roles.
No Dum Dum Dugan this time.
No Dum Dum Dugan this season. Or Stan Lee. There's no Stan Lee cameo this season either.
Sad.
But we do see Lindsay Fonseca, who was Angie, and Dominic Cooper, both of whom saw significantly reduced roles of Season 2, though Fonseca to the more egregious degree. I would still characterize Howard Stark as a cameo more than, like, a regular appearance, though, because he appears in, like, maybe 3 episodes tops.
Though I will say this, when he is on screen, though, he definitely steals all the scenes.
He's like father, like son.
Yep.
And then you also have a returning cameo of Ray Wise as Hugh Jones, who is the owner of Stark competitor Roxxon.
Which I love that.
It is. It's a great moment with Ray Wise, who really feels still... his character feels a lot like a combination of his role in Twin Peaks with Benjamin Horne, who's the owner of the hotel in Twin Peaks. And it's like both of those characters meshed into one guy. And honestly, that whole sequence of, like, Peggy fucking around with Hugh Jones, like, constantly zapping his memory and, like, trying to interrogate him and stuff.
Oh, it causes mild brain damage? Okay,
it's very much exactly what I wanted out of Audrey Horne in Twin Peaks Season 3, and we never got it. I still won't spoil Twin Peaks Season 3 for you, but we didn't get what I wanted out of Audrey Horne, and I just have to, like... envision what Peggy is with not Laura Palmer's dad.
Fuck you, Leyland Palmer.
Yes, exactly. And I just kind of want to imprint Audrey Horne onto the top of Peggy right there. And they also have, like, weirdly similar, like, fashion aesthetics.
Yeah, especially with the red wig and the bangs, and I'm over here like, it's very Natasha of you, Peggy.
It was extremely Natasha of her, especially in a season where she gets to pal around with Dottie a lot more.
Who literally wore a black and red dress.
For most of the season.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you also see the return of Leslie Boone as Rose Roberts, and she also has a far more expanded role within the SSR. She returns from the New York office working reception for the LA office, but she's far more of like a central character now.
Yeah,
we return to her in every episode. She has a personality.
Yeah, she actually has a personality. She gets to do things this time. She gets to play an active role, and we get to see that she's just as capable an agent as Peggy is.
I loved that so much.
It was very
so much.
It was very, very good.
I love that we get all these dudes who claim that they're such independent men, and they all listen to these very specific ladies who are all very similar to Peggy.
Well, they're similar to Peggy, but the thing is, what I liked is that each one of them had their own distinct personality.
Yes.
They each had their own distinct fashion.
Yes.
And they each had their own distinct way of approaching things.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, because Peggy would not put up with all of the advances from the scientist that Rose does.
No.
Violet is a very different person from Peggy. Mm-hmm. Which I can see why Sousa would pick somebody very different from Peggy to move on with, but I also fully respected her decision.
Yeah,
and I liked that it wasn't all about, I'm jealous of Peggy, and I can't believe she did this. Like, it could have become this really awful, catty thing, and she's angrier at Daniel than she is at Peggy, because she knows damn well this isn't Peggy's fault, it's Daniel's.
Yeah, it's his fault for not being honest.
With anybody.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that, because I think one of the things for the longest time that put me off of actually watching this season was because I was afraid that they were going to write Violet like that, because I knew Daniel, had a thing with some other chick in there. And I was really pleased that not only was she smart, she was sweet, she was funny, she was very cute.
She was very poised under pressure.
Yes, and she didn't turn into this stupid fucking stereotype that so many men end up writing about women, and it's like, no.
Yeah, they always want, yet don't want, these bridezillas, like these hyper-jealous women, but it's like, you don't actually want that, and women don't actually act like this.
No, you guys write this same thing so many times. I've seen it, and yeah, it is usually with men that are at the script writing. There are plenty of women that aren't very good at writing women either. But
fair. It's really obvious when you don't have women involved at all, though.
Yeah.
And it helps that I think that there are female showrunners on this show.
Yes.
This season also added a female director, and we still have female writers, even if not every single one of the writers is a woman.
Yes.
it helps a lot.
Basically, what it boils down to is that you're actually showing women having a lot more nuance than a lot of these tropes and stereotypes that too often populate an alarming amount of shows.
Yes, absolutely.
It just, sorry, but it sucks. I know there are plenty of people out there that are probably rolling their eyes at it, but it sucks. It sucks to watch characters like this over and over again.
You don't have to apologize for that, because it's a token trope that's not interesting. You're not saying anything. It's not contributing to the story at all. It's really just there to assuage a dude's ego.
Yeah. And to make another woman look better over the other and one look bad.
Exactly.
And it's like, no, sometimes the guy is the one that fucks up, and sometimes both women have a right to be angry at him.
No, it is the children who are wrong.
Like, just, all I'm asking for is, like, better writing on all sides. I like getting to see dudes with feelings, and some emotional complexity, and less posturing and all this other crap. Even though, yes, sometimes it can actually be done in a very comedic way, like with Deadpool.
Yeah.
Other times, it's like a fucking Michael Bay movie, and I'm so sick of it. I could.
Yeah, we do not need any more Michael Bay's treatment of Megan Fox in anything, please.
I like having dudes with feelings, some emotional complexity. I like having women that have some more nuance and actually have decent characters. And I don't mind having female villains. I want more women villains. I want femme fatales. I want women who are bitches. I want women who are not bitches. I want women who, could literally just stomp on your balls and walk away and be like, yeah, I did that. I want better for everybody in general.
Yes.
And I don't think that that's asking for too much.
You'd think. So in addition, Season 2 also introduces several new central roles, such as Wynn Everett as Whitney Frost. Speaking of female villains and femme fatales.
Yes.
Reggie Austin as Dr. Jason Wilkes. Matt Bronger as SSR Dr. Samberly, who is the scientist who bugs Rose all the time. Curie Graham as Calvin Chadwick. We actually have a real Chad in this show that isn't just Chad Michael Murray.
Another Chad over here.
Lottie Verbeek as Anna Jarvis. Perfect.
Yes.
Kurtwood Smith as the ambitious Vernon Masters, and honestly, I couldn't picture him doing anything other than calling everyone a dumbass the entire season.
Yes.
She's like, damn it, Kelso, you dumbass.
You dumbass. I kept waiting for him to say that.
Well, he even calls Jack Thompson Jackie at one point, and I had a flashback to that 70s show, and I'm like, oh god.
I had a traumatic flashback to that 70s show.
Where's my crossover with Jupiter Ascending? I need it right now.
Oh god. No.
You're welcome. And Ken Marina as Joseph Manfredi, who I also really came to adore. He really starts off as like this token, very Goodfellas Italian mobster stereotype. And then by the end of the show, he ends up with this very...
it's kind of sad, actually.
They give him an expanded character to the point where I'm like, oh, he's like a whole person. Thank you for not just making him this... Yeah. Terrible stereotype, even if that one scene where he's like yelling at his bodyguard when Whitney and her then still husband visit him for dinner is like so extremely Goodfellas, and I loved it to death.
He's so aggro about everything, and it's like you expect him to be a certain way, but then no, he actually gets some emotional depth to him, and I appreciated that.
But yes, it is very much, that one scene is very much that opening scene from Goodfellas.
Well, it's not really an opening scene.
Well, you get what I mean. Early scene.
Am I funny to you? Am I a clown? Do I amuse you? You think I'm funny?
Yeah. I love it. Yeah, and I did think it was absolutely hilarious. And I loved what they did with Anna, because they could have also made her, like, terribly jealous. Why are you going out with my husband all the time? Whatever,
Especially
whatever.
When there's a scene when Jarvis literally has his face pressed into Peggy's ass. I'm like, I see you, sir.
Yeah. Well, and there's also this point when, like, he's on top of her, and, like, Anna walks in, and she's like, oh, how's the sparring going? I'm like, I love her. I don't care if she comes off kind of like the Hungarian manic pixie dream girl, but I loved her.
Yeah, I really appreciate that they did not take that angle at all. Instead, they went the opposite direction of having her very supportive of her husband, very into and supporting Peggy, and it's like, yes, thank you, finally.
Also, Anna is one of, like, the staunchest supporters of Dr. Wilkes, who is the show's black lead.
Yeah.
He's the turncoat scientist from Isodyne, who turncoats a couple different times to varying successful effect. It's one of those where they kind of go back and forth on it way too much.
Yeah.
I really did like what they did with Jason, but it is one of those where I'm like, they try and compare his situation to Whitney's as a white woman a little too hard.
Well, I mean, I got what they were trying to do when she's like, you know, people who are marginalized, you know, I'm a woman and I haven't gotten the respect that I deserve, and you're a black man, you haven't gotten the respect you deserve, and neither of these places, these circles that we want to go in, especially a scientific field, all these, you know, fucking white men, they only let us in, you know, as like a pittance.
Mm-hmm.
It's to make themselves look good. It's not because they're actually showing us the respect they deserve. And I totally got that part of her spiel, and I honestly liked it.
I do like it, but on the other hand, imagine how much more effective that would have been if Whitney had also been a woman of color. They make strides, and they have moved forward on their diversity, and I will congratulate them for that. I really loved Jason's story. I loved it a lot. But on the same side of that, Agent Carter still kind of has a problem with very white woman exclusive feminism. Because we still don't really have a lot of women of color unless they are somebody that Howard Stark banged and were there for like 2 seconds. And it's kind of unfortunate. I don't think that undermines everything it's trying to do.
No.
I just wish that it had been able to go that extra step.
Like, honestly, looking at Marvel and a lot of what it's done, I think it's trying... Some of these outings try to balance it with introducing a more diverse cast without making it heavy-handed and pandering.
Mm-hmm.
And just, you know, actually having the characters be on screen and actually, you know, be there in a meaningful way, like Black Panther, you know? It's like, Wakanda is Wakanda. That's what it is. It's not, you know, trying to be super pandery or anything.
It's not trying to be a morality tale.
Yeah.
Basically is what you're getting at.
And I feel like some of them, though, try a little too hard, like Eternals. And then
we'll get to that.
And then but I feel like when it comes to Agent Carter, I feel like it's trying hard to stay true to what
the time period.
Yeah, to not just the time period, but also to its origins as like a kind of tales of adventure type of thing. Where, I mean, even in the comics, you didn't see a lot of. You really didn't see a lot of Black Asian people in those stories, and if they were usually like the villains or some throwaway character. I think them actually making Jason such a prominent figure
and a potential love interest for most of the show.
Yes, a very potential love interest, and the chemistry they had was very good.
Even Jarvis characterizes him as having an incandescent smile.
Yeah, even Jarvis sounds like he's got a crush on him, and I appreciate all of that.
And Anna's in love with him. Anna has like dinner with him at one point. Like Anna's very supportive of him. Yeah,
and I feel like the way Agent Carter did it was probably as graceful as it could do it, considering what it was trying to do and when it was taking place.
And there are still some moments where I'm like, ooh, it's a little uncomfortable. I know that it's very true to the period, the terminology and stuff, but oof. And I almost thought that they weren't going to go there when they first introduced Jason, and then an episode later, you get to the ramifications of that, and I'm like, there it was. There was the thing I was just saying I was kind of surprised wasn't there. Mm-hmm. But I really appreciated that Peggy didn't care about it. No one on Team Carter really gave a shit.
No.
Aside from Jackie Boy, who was just kind of... They could not decide what they wanted to do with Jack Thompson this season at all. They either wanted him to be a moron, they wanted him to be the token chauvinist pig, or they wanted him to be the super smart 3D chess guy. But you gotta pick one.
I will say this, though. At least when it comes to Jack being a dick to everybody, he is pretty much a dick to everybody.
That is true, but...
That's the one consistent thing with him, I feel
But
like.
he's the one, quote, good guy who's really like, well... Did you really think about what that's gonna look like?
Ugh.
Jack, no one cares.
Like, Jack,
well,
shut
other
up.
people like you might care, but no one on Team Carter gives a remote crap. Nobody.
Chad, shut up. That's what I kept saying through a lot of these episodes.
Which is not Chad Michael Murray's fault, to be fair.
Not.
It's Thompson's writing's fault.
Yeah, they really did not. They gave him such a good arc in the first season, and then in this season,
they rolled it back really hard to make... because they were so intent on making the Council of Nine, which is a comic book thing called Secret Empire, which originally started out as like a branch of Hydra.
The Council of Nine or the Council of Nine?
Nine!
Is that another Hydra nod?
Well, they did start off as a branch of Hydra and then turned into their own thing. They tried to have this, like, the rot goes deep in the SSR and, like, constantly nod to Hydra in S.H.I.E.L.D. before S.H.I.E.L.D's even been created. Except that you killed most of the people that would have done that, so I'm still really confused as to why we even did this, other than the very end of the show that people call a cliffhanger, and I thought it was pretty obvious what they were trying to set up with that.
I mean, it is technically a cliffhanger in the context of the story, in the show itself, but it's like, at the same time, it's really not, though. Because
it made complete sense what happened to Thompson at the end of the show to me.
We know what happens because we know Howard and Peggy, because of the films, because of all these other films with Marvel, we know Howard and Peggy remain friends for the rest of their years alive. Mm-hmm. We know they start and run S.H.I.E.L.D. themselves. With
the Tommy Lee Jones, who never comes up again, but they do it with Tommy Lee Jones.
And it's like, yeah, it's like, okay, I mean, sure, that I would have appreciated having a third season just to round it out and actually see the creation of S.H.I.E.L.D., sure. But, like, it's really not that much of a cliffhanger in terms of the overall story here.
It only feels like a cliffhanger if you're watching it in context with everything we know now. If you're watching Season 2 of Agent Carter on its own, in the order that we're watching it in, right? In the chronological order. Okay, I can kind of see being a little disappointed at not really getting to see the founding of S.H.I.E.L.D. Not really getting to see what happened in the aftermath of what happened to Thompson. Not really getting to see the consequences of Peggy and Sousa's relationship. Mm-hmm. Fine. But as it stands, really wasn't that confused. I could kind of see where they were going with everything.
Yeah.
But if you put it in context of what happens at the end of, say, Endgame, yeah, I have a lot of questions. But again, I will get to that at the end of Endgame because I will go on for an hour about the inconsistencies of the end of Endgame
along with
this show in particular.
Along with the absolute decimation of character arcs that were pretty hard won in this season and overall. In
the show overall.
Yeah, that's
the
what
whole
I mean.
show, well, the whole show and the whole of Steve's arc in general.
The whole of Steve's arc, the whole of Peggy's arc.
They're both about processing grief.
And moving on.
And how much healthier it is to do that, to not get stuck in the past and never want to see anyone else, never want to experience life outside of this one great thing you had, while still being able to respect that great thing you had.
And sure, you know, she was all like, oh, well, Steve's the love of my life, but she ends up finding a guy who
is basically Steve
2.0.
Sousa is basically Steve, and I know that we're going to get to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 7, and it's going to go off the walls along with the end of the Infinity Saga, and none of that's going to make sense, but Marcus McFeely can tell me what they want about Peggy's family and the end of Endgame all they want, and it will never make sense to me.
Yeah, it will not make sense in the context of this damn show and how you
it doesn't make sense in the context of Civil War, which they also wrote.
Yeah.
Again, we'll get to all of that when we get to those, because this doesn't make a lot of sense with just Agent Carter under our belts. But
this is the problem of doing all this stuff.
Interconnected stuff, yeah.
Well, yeah, and not just the interconnectedness, but they did all of it out of order, too. They've been time jumping over and over with all this different shit to the fact to where outcomes are less tense or
I would respect some of these moves more if they just say, you know what, we didn't really think that through. It was a fan service moment. You can just assume that this is a different universe or whatever, because we basically get to the point where they have so many different multiverses that's explainable. Yeah. If you just admit that that's all it was, and that you weren't trying to rewrite the main timeline, or whatever Loki calls it. They called it the sacred timeline.
The sacred timeline.
If you're not trying to rewrite the sacred timeline, I don't care. You can go off and do whatever you want. It can be inconsistent all you want, and we can just assume that things like Agent Carter or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or whatever exist, and they still exist on their own branched off timelines, even if they're not part of
the main
thing.
The sacred timeline.
Right.
Also, are we going to talk about that cameo that looked like it was Peggy being brought in by the
We'll get to that when we get to Loki, and the implications of that. Mm-hmm. And the implications or non-implications of the end of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in comparison with that. We'll get to that too.
I'm not looking forward to watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
I know you're not. So, in terms of cinematography, Season 2 also introduces the audience to a new cinematographer, Edward J. Pye. Pye's previous credits are also far more television and miniseries oriented, which include Stephen King's The Stand from 1994, select episodes of Streets of Laredo from 1995, that Helen of Troy miniseries in 2003 that I tend to not think about.
Is that the Hallmark one?
The one I don't like, yeah. That is the one I really, really despise. I don't like it because I don't like the way that they wrote a lot of the characters. That is going to get into a tangent for another day. I'm extremely picky about my Greek myth retellings, and that is not one I like.
That's an understatement, I can tell you that.
And he also worked on Sci-Fi's Dominion, which was a short-lived television series that was a sequel spin-off to the Paul Bettany outing Legion in 2010, which was questionably not quite successful, and not really a cult hit either. They just thought that they could make like a good TV concept. But again, note that it's Sci-Fi making the TV show. And it shows, but the irony of that also is that Anthony Stewart Head was in Dominion, and he was also the evil father figure in Merlin. He's Uther Pendragon in Merlin as well. Oh. So you have a lot of these weird meta crossovers with the directors and the cinematographer of this season as well.
I mean, it's like how over on the MCU, all of these actors that have been in all these other things are finally all meeting in the Marvel.
Well, when you have something that's expansive as Marvel, you can't even play 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon anymore because it all comes back to one place.
Yeah, and they all end up coming to the same movie eventually.
Well, and speaking of 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, you even have like a whole moment here that connects back to Kevin Bacon in an X-Men movie.
Yep, as an actual
as an actual dude in an X-Men movie.
Yeah, like an actual major villain that ends up wrecking a lot of chaos and causing a lot of shit to happen.
Yeah.
That has all these ramifications that lead to a whole nother...
We will get to X-Men First Class, and I'll get back to more on X-Men First Class in a minute, other than the Emma Frost similarity that we pointed out earlier.
Yeah, we will be getting... We'll be doing a whole slew of episodes on the X-Men movies and the TV shows.
Yes. So, the show finally also moves on to consistent previously on openings. They stopped trying to do those noir-esque voiceovers that didn't really work for season 1.
God. Like, if you're gonna just do that, just do the previously on, and that's fine, okay? That's fine.
We checked every episode, and then we wouldn't watch the previously on. We just wanted to make sure that it stayed the same.
That it stayed consistent throughout.
The only thing that wasn't consistent is that some episodes would wait for, like, the music sting and the logo, and then would start, and some would have, like, this odd cold opening, and I don't know if you can call it a cold opening if it still has the previously on before it, but sort of, because it all happens before the credits thing happens.
Yeah.
So, some of them have pseudo TV cold openings, I guess, and some of them don't. To varying effect, there's the one episode when Peggy and Sousa are doing the investigation into some crime. They go into, like, somebody's house or something, I think, and they're, like, investigating something. And it worked really well for that episode, but it didn't always seem to work well. I honestly kind of forgot about it when they did it sometimes. I only noticed it because we were skipping the previously on so much, and I had to try and find the right point to start the episode.
We don't need the previously on, we're binging it, okay?
I appreciate that it's there and that it's at least consistent this time.
Yes.
And it doesn't feel like this weird YA attempt at voicing over. It just didn't work for them. If they'd wanted to keep that tone, they really needed to just start that from the beginning, having voiceovers and using them in more than just the previously ons.
I mean, considering how convoluted the plot was, they absolutely justified having it this time when they were actually doing it week to week, back when it was airing.
I think the only time we watched it was the first season so that we could get the recap on the previous season, even though we just watched it, and the day that we, like, paused between episodes. Yeah. So I think between, like, episode 4 and episode 5...
Yeah.
We watched the previously on, but when we were binging episodes all at once, we just skipped them all.
Yes.
The television feel is even encapsulated in the otherwise very successful musical sequence as the decision was made to use personalities from Dancing with the Stars for background dancers among the beauty school dropout character cameos. So a lot of those background dancers who aren't characters you recognize are, like, rando personalities from, like, Dancing with the Stars, because I believe that was also an ABC TV show, and they could just kind of cross them over.
Oh, that was a choice.
Well, I mean, you needed backup dancers. That's all they were there for, I guess.
And they do dance. So.
And it looked fine. I wouldn't have known otherwise if I hadn't read it, right?
Would not have known, because I was way too focused on Haley Atwell and all the other characters I actually did recognize.
Yeah, there were certain special effects this season also where you could tell that the budget was being spread a little thinner across episodes.
Yes.
Some of it was more effective than others. A lot of the Zero Matter stuff actually looked really nice, though, including, like, the makeup effects and, like, the actual, like, sky rift effects that they did with that.
Yes.
And there's a reason why it looked nice.
Like, the way the atom bomb just went, like...
Well...
That was a really effective sequence, I feel like.
Well, Agent Carter, Season 2 of Agent Carter used the same special effects team, Double Negative. They go as, like, D-Neg now. They're not called Double Negative anymore, but they were called Double Negative at the time. And this was also the team that worked on Interstellar.
Well, that explains why the black hole literally looks like the black hole in Interstellar.
It's because they wrote the programs for Interstellar and then reused them for the riffs in Agent Carter, and that's why they look the way that they do.
Because, I mean, if you look up the black hole sequence in Interstellar, look at the image of it versus how it looks in Agent Carter, and they're identical.
Well, and I made a note where I thought that it was very, like, proto-multiverse of them to do this Zero Matter thing, but then I started actually, like, looking into what Zero Matter was. in Marvel. And it's not actually called Zero Matter in the greater Marvel canon.
Yeah, see?
Yeah, it does look extremely similar. Maybe aside from, like, the weird Saturn ring on it.
No, it had that in Agent Carter. Did it? Yes, it did.
I just remember the eclipse circle around it.
No, it had the ring. It had the ring.
I'll trust you. Too. I'll trust you. But yeah, they used the same program that they used for that, and that's why they look very, very similar.
Look just like that. That's why when I first started seeing it, I was like, Interstellar.
Yeah.
It's a black hole. I knew it. Which, I mean, makes sense that the dark matter would actually live there, considering all what black holes do is consume. That's what the dark matter does.
Well, and Agent Carter doesn't dig into it, but zero matter is actually called dark matter in the comics, and dark matter is part of the dark dimension.
Ooh.
So, technically, this rift connects back to Doctor Strange and Dormammu.
And the multiverse.
They just didn't call it that in Agent Carter, but the writers have confirmed, oh yeah, it does have that little thing in the middle. Okay, yeah, it is very similar. But they... Where was I going with that? Oh no.
It was connected to the dark dimension.
Yeah, it's connected to the dark dimension. And ironically, in the comics, so the dark matter stuff is also heavily connected to Secret Empire, which is what the Council of Nine and the Arena Club was in Agent Carter. And Dr. Faustus in the comics was a member of Secret Empire.
So he was having Dottie steal from his own club?
Well, in MCU canon, that's not true. They're just making that constant nod back. I don't think she was stealing from them necessarily. I think she was trying to get in on it because she was very interested in everything they were doing. She's also a woman, and they specifically did not allow women. So I think that there's an element of Dottie there. Also, she doesn't have a country anymore, so she's not really working for him anymore. She's working for herself, and I think that there was an element of, like, self-serving interest in that. It could have still been related to Johann, but we won't ever know, because Johann doesn't show back up. I just thought it was an interesting note that Faustus used to be a member of the Secret Empire. There's also a comic. Let me see if I can find it. Did I write it down? Oh, no. Oh no. There's a comic where... Oh, yeah. In the comics, the Dark Force, or Dark Dimension, is used in Secret Empire by Baron Zemo.
You mean Baron Von Sugar Daddy?
Yes. I mean, we won't get to him for a very long time because he's not actually connected to Leviathan or Hydra, thankfully.
That's the nickname we gave Daniel Bruhl in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
I think it's the nickname that a lot of people gave him, to be fair. My favorite ever.
It was so good.
But in the MCU, we don't necessarily call it the Dark Force in any of the MCU proper. They call it the Dark Dimension in Doctor Strange, and that's about all we talk about it.
Yes.
But in the rest of, like, Marvel properties, we also see the Dark Force or Zero Matter used in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 1, Cloak and Dagger, and Runaways. They all bring it up. So all of the ABC/Hulu television shows are all interconnected in that they share this not gamma radiation thing. We're watching vines of Marvel videos, and Em is freaking out over this kid, like, singing at Nick Fury right now. We just leave it on in the background, and sometimes it's really hard to not laugh at it.
It is very hard.
But, yeah, so the TV shows, even if they're not connected to the MCU anymore, are all connected to each other. And they're all connected by the dark dimension rather than, like, MCU's obsession with, like, gamma radiation and the Infinity Stones.
I mean, you'd never be able to tell that they're all connected with how Marvel keeps trying to, like, bury some of these shows and be like, no, that never happened.
Especially Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Especially Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Especially the Incredible Hulk.
Well, yeah,
Which
but they
isn't
still
even on
bring...
Disney
It's
Plus.
because they still want to just be able to, like, mention gamma radiation at any time they want. They can retcon everything they want from the Hulk, but because they made it and they've had Hulk show up in different stuff now, they can still use gamma and people will know what they're talking about.
Yes.
See the presence of gamma radiation in Agent Carter, too, because they suddenly bring it in, and I'm like... Okay, so we are officially part of the MCU now, are we?
They have a gamma ray, and all of a sudden Howard Stark just was like, yeah, no, build this for me.
I don't understand, speaking of, and I went into, like, some of the science on how, like, gamma radiation would not work the way that it worked on Bruce Banner in, like, anybody. There's, like, a 1 in a billion chance that it would change your DNA that way. Obviously, because it's not real science. But, at the same time, we're talking about radiation that screws with, like, your DNA, and it actually can kill you. Like, it's real radiation that can fuck with you to the point that you just die.
I mean, it can kill you and fuck with your DNA.
As all radiation
but
can.
It will not rip a pair of purple pants.
No, it won't.
No.
But it will close a rift in space-time.
Somehow.
Somehow.
Somehow. Science.
That's how his pants never rip.
Because
it's dark matter. That's what his purple pants are made out of. They're made out of zero matter. Figured it out. But the thing I don't get with gamma radiation is you build this machine to gosh, to shoot a laser of gamma radiation at an area, right? And you're not supposed to be within the blast radius of the zero matter, or it'll suck you into the black hole.
Yeah, not just any area, but fire it into the black hole.
But how does that laser not have radiation effect to everyone around it using it? That's the thing I don't get. You have to be around, like, the blast radius of, like, the zero matter so you don't get sucked into the black hole and become Matthew McConaughey. But...
the power of love will clearly save them.
Yeah, I guess so, which, I mean, it's Marvel, so that's correct, but I just don't... I don't get how they don't ever think about that, especially when you have the Hulk where they're... just using gamma radiation willy-nilly.
Willy-nilly.
I mean, that's Marvel's... That was Marvel's pre...
I cannot wait for you to finally watch The Incredible Hulk and actually see what it is.
It was their pre-Vibranium answer to everything.
Pretty much. Like, they had such an over-reliance on trying to explain everything away with pseudoscience, but it's like, guys, even your pseudoscience does not really make a lot of sense.
The Vita rays make more sense than gamma the way that Hulk's gamma radiation does. I read a science book on Marvel about this, and I don't remember the specifics of it, but the Vita rays with the super soldier serum make more sense than the Hulk does. Because they're basically just using gamma as, like, this magical cure-all. Or, you know, magic explanation. It's like the Deus Ex Machina. It's there to fix everything or cause everything, as maybe. Anyway, so you have, like, this more consistent feel between, like, writers. You have this more consistent feel with the special effects teams. But the consistency still comes at the cost between Season 1 and Season 2, and we've talked about how it doesn't feel as noir anymore.
Yeah,
a lot of the tone is lost, even though it keeps some of the violence. I mean, we see people get shot directly in the head several times this season.
Yeah, actually.
There isn't enough...
We see people literally turn into ice and then just... they shatter like glass.
Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good.
Don't. That's too soon. Too soon.
It will never be too soon, because
that was sad.
It wasn't.
Don't do that.
It wasn't sad.
It was very sad.
It was not sad.
How dare you.
But with Season 2, it comes and goes, and we only really begin to see the noir with about halfway through the season, and there's no part of it that's more obvious than the musical number, where you actually get to see the neon, you get to see the noir aspects, you get to see the costumes, everything.
I guess this can be attributed to the fact that, again going back to movies from the 40s and 50s, you had the movies that were set in New York that usually did have a very different tone.
They were all very hard-boiled crime dramas.
They were usually very dark. You had the streets with steam or fog and all this stuff to make it look almost like a horror movie, but not quite. Not quite there.
And then you have the West Coast movies that don't feel that way.
Which are bright and sunny and, colorful when they start coloring stuff and, everyone kind of acts a little different.
And I mean, that's why I really like LA Noire as a video game in most respects, because it actually does feel very much like LA. I mean, like, they even used parts of the old, like, street maps and stuff. And they had an equally incompetent LAPD.
Every time I think of LA Noire, I just think of that meme, press X to download.
Well, I mean, that's
that
what I wish I wish that Thompson had been pressing X more often, but he kept not doing it.
I honestly wanted to believe he was pulling a long con there for
I
a
really
while.
did too. But with the musical number, ironically, the music was composed by the same composer from earlier Agent Carter, and the lyrics for that song that was actually sung by Atwell and Jokai.
Which they can actually sing.
They can.
They sang very well.
As can Angie's actress. That was actually written by the same lyricist who did The Star-Spangled Man. It's the same lyricist that used to work with Alan Menken.
Oh.
That's why it still feels very in tone, because that part of it is at least consistent, and the finale felt so good in comparison. It felt like we'd actually gotten back to form.
I think it's just the fact that when they moved to the West Coast, they took the sunny California coast thing a little too literally, and we got all that kind of silliness, and we lost the dark tone that actually felt very fitting for Peggy Carter's world.
We lost the noir with Angie. That's what we did.
Like, it wasn't just the fact that, it's Peggy Carter and espionage, but it felt fitting for a post-World War II world, is what it felt like.
Yeah, and I know that they were trying to get into the whole McCarthyism. Yeah. The slow rise of McCarthyism and everyone's a communist kind of stuff here, even though it's a little early. But at the same time, like, I don't feel like that went hard enough. And I'm sure that we would have gotten into that with season 3, especially with the ending of season 2 and what happens to Thompson and that forged file and everything. I get it. I know that it's coming, and there has to be a reason why they formed S.H.I.E.L.D. in the 50s in the first place. And I also understand with season 2 a little bit more as to how the SSR actually functions, ironically. Even though they were still trying to hit too hard on that whole Hydra versus S.H.I.E.L.D. thing, they actually talk about how they based for this season, they didn't talk about this in earlier seasons for some reason, but with this season they talked about how the SSR is actually based on an old real-life wartime organization, and it was called the Office of Strategic... Oh gosh, I lost it somewhere. It's the OSS. The OSS, and I don't remember what it was called. It was like the Office of... I have it written down somewhere. The Office of Strategic Services. I should have figured that out. That's why the Strategic Science Reserve. That's why you have the strategic in there. Yeah. But at the same time, the OSS was actually phased out after the war because it was specifically a wartime office. Yeah. They phased it out and rolled it into the CIA... the same way that the SSR is eventually rolled into S.H.I.E.L.D. Yes. And knowing that, it suddenly made a little more sense as to how they were trying to do this. I still don't get, in particular, which people were supposed to have founded S.H.I.E.L.D. when we don't have appearances from the people we claim founded it, at least on 1/3 of that end. I mean, but at least functionally, I kind of understand what's going on better.
Yeah, they basically handle stuff that is out of the periphery of the FBI and the normal police. Right. And and especially stuff that is connected to Hydra, stuff that is a little otherworldly, but they're still just scratching the surface. Well, and then it somehow ended up discovering multiverse right there.
Right, and the one thing I did like about them trying to install the Council of Nine / the Arena Club / the FBI, the fixed elections, the whatever in there, and oh man, that hits different in 2022, let me tell you, from when that originally came out in 2016, before we even knew what was going to happen. in 2016. Thankfully, we did not know what was going to happen at that time.
Nope.
Fine. But
a lot of stuff hits very differently in 2022 now.
It really does. But the thing I do like about it is me bringing it back to X-Men First Class. And the way that they set up the Council of Nine with the Arena Club is extremely extremely similar to the way that they introduced the Hellfire Club in X-Men First Class, which is set over the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s.
Yes.
20 years difference. Well, 15 years difference, I guess, because it's the early 60s.
And yet they still somehow managed to be
they're
similar.
Extremely similar. Similar coast, even though the Hellfire Club, I believe, was in Vegas. Similar way to enter. Peggy entered with a bunch of, dancers and female entertainers, the way that Moira did.
Mm-hmm.
And she even sneaks into a back office with a fake library.
Yep, a fake little
to sit there and espionage on the bad guys, who also have extremely similar ends to, oh gosh, what was Kevin Bacon's character's name in that? Shaw. Sebastian Shaw. Shaw. Because I always would confuse it with Sebastian Stan.
No, Seb Stan is not that.
It's just the names just sound similar.
It is, but the other thing though, when bringing up Sebastian Shaw, is that his whole power was basically absorbing energy, right?
Yeah, he's a lot like Whitney Frost, who looks a lot like Emma Frost.
He's a lot like Dark Matter himself. Right?
Well, and the way that her face cracks is a lot like Emma Frost's, diamond effect. Mm-hmm. Or at least more like the Twilight version of Emma Frost diamond effect, because that's essentially what the Twilight vampires are, is they're Emma Frost.
Versus the very glassy effect they had in Wolverine Origins.
Yeah, that one they made her a literal diamond in that one, and I did not like that. I liked the First Class one where, she kind of moved like she was made out of a mineral and stuff. It was really neat the way that they did that in First Class. But, yeah, the Council of Nine and Whitney Frost are very much this odd juxtaposition of the way that First Class handled the Hellfire Club, Shaw, and Emma Frost. Which is an irony, because Whitney Frost is an actual character in Marvel Comics. She's not an XP for something that they put in there because they couldn't do Emma Frost or whatever. She's an actual character. She's called Madame Mask in the comics, and she hooks up with Tony Stark at one point, but she's also a villain vaguely related to the mob, if I remember right. I don't remember how, but that's how they get around her having, the side piece boyfriend in the Mafia.
Yeah, he's basically running, a mob... LA. He's running on the mafia.
He's running a New York mafia in LA. Because of course Tony Stark knows the guy.
No, Howard Stark knows the guy.
That's right. They're the same character. Fight me. They're the same fucking character.
Which, that's... Yeah, the guy he said he was from Yonkers.
Yeah.
So he's literally a New York mafia
Well, and we're still talking about Howard Stark, who was characterized in Agent Carter as... not coming from privilege, having been poor, having grown up on, the rough side of the tracks. Mm-hmm. Of course he knows the fucking mafia guy from New York. New York, who is banging this lady who, in comics cases, is banging Tony Stark.
And doesn't Howard, have this throwaway line that if she wasn't crazy, he totally would have fallen in love with her?
Yeah, because they shared very similar scientific minds, because part of the inspiration behind Whitney Frost, in Agent Carter, at least, being the scientific genius that she is, even though outside of the MCU's obsession with STEM for a long time, up until we could inject magic into anything, part of that inspiration was not just styling her Lauren Bacall or whoever was the bombshell actress in the 40s, right? But she's basically being modeled on real life Hedy Lamarr, except crazy. But they also do this thing, and you can kind of see the Jessica Jones nods in it, because there are these consistent points in Whitney's backstory, and even parts in the every once in a while it'll do it in the current to season 2 story, where they'll be like, you'd be so much prettier if you smiled. And they pull that in Jessica Jones a lot, and it's supposed to be this mark of Jessica's brainwashing.
Yeah.
But in this, I saw somebody trying to juxtapose it as Whitney being brainwashed by the system or whatever, and I'm like, I don't think that's what it is at all. It's the breakdown of her mental stability and her obsessiveness with her goal. She's very different than Jessica because she's not brainwashed by anybody other than maybe her... She's just obsessed with her own ambition. It's not brainwashing.
Basically, a lot of men have tried to break her down, and she has basically tried to play the long game in order to get what she wants.
Yeah, because the show is very specific, and Jason even says this at the point where he's like, that wasn't the zero matter. I made those decisions. And he takes full accountability for that, and I really appreciate that they had him do that. But at that point, you also, I don't know how anybody can argue that this was Whitney being brainwashed by zero matter or the system or whatever, we've established that these are very specific choices people are making.
Yeah, this was a very specific choice for her, because the minute she actually tasted that power, it's like...
she wanted it.
Yeah. It
wasn't brainwashing.
All of that rage, all of that bitterness, everything that she had been keeping bottled up inside to try to just slowly maneuver her way to the top, it just got unleashed. And no, I think what it did is that it, just something in her, and the rest of it was purely just her just becoming obsessed, it basically absolute power corrupts absolute.
Right, but on Whitney's end, she sees it as freedom from having to be complicit in the system. Because up to that point, we see her very much playing on the kind of advice that her mother gave her, but twisting it and manipulating it to her own ends, rather than, well, I just have to get married, I have to rely on a man. Yeah. No, she's using men. She's not relying on them, she's using them. It's very different.
Yeah.
But I feel like once she got that power, she saw that as a sort of freedom, and I think that kind of exacerbated her obsession with it.
Yes, it absolutely did, because any threat that there was to taking it from her, she freaked out, because she finally had what she wanted. She had the respect, she had the power, she was able to call all the shots, and the minute it was being threatened to be taken away from her, she she was willing to do anything, including hurt innocent people, to keep it.
And it's unfortunate, because she had an extremely brilliant mind, and we're juxtaposing her against Peggy, who is someone who's basically just fought against the system and punched it into submission so hard that she's just on top now.
Yeah.
Whereas Whitney can't really do that. She's trying to manipulate the system to use the system for her own ends. But she's kind of taking an easy way out, which is unfortunate because she's not at the same time, because she's extremely brilliant. She had to do all this research, all this experimentation, all this whatever. We just kind of see her as getting really attached to what she wants these specific results to be. Yeah. Unfortunately. But I thought that she was actually a very good foil for Peggy in that respect.
Because for as smart as Peggy is, she still relies a lot on action. She doesn't rely as much on trying to, break it down to a science, say, people like Howard or Jason or Whitney.
No, Peggy deliberately relies on the scientists around her to be scientists. And you see this with her relative respect of the science department in the SSR. Though I don't know why anybody in the SSR doesn't respect the science department when they're called the Strategic Science Reserve, or the Strategic Scientific Reserve, whatever. The science is literally in the name, and they're just really dismissive of their scientists.
Yes.
Except for Peggy, who remembers their names, and then will boost their egos to get them to do what needs to be done. But she knows damn well that those things are not things that she can handle. And that is growth that we've actually seen consistent since season 1, is her realizing that she cannot do things on her own, and actually, that she is more capable with a team.
Yeah, and
that each of those teams, or each of those members and parts of that team, each have their own skills.
She's reaching out to other people instead of just solely relying on herself and trying to do everything by herself. She's like, no, I need help with this. Like, can you please help with this?
Yeah.
I need your help. Like, she's a very effective leader, but also one of the things about being a good leader is that you know when to ask for help.
And recognizing the talents of the people around you and being able to use them rather than trying to steal the spotlight every 2 seconds, Jack Thompson.
Which is,
that's Jack's problem, precisely.
That's why you got the idiot boss, sir.
He did. He had it for a full half a season at least, and it was so frustrating.
And meanwhile, Peggy gets to have the slow Reservoir Dogs 40 style.
That was a beautiful walkout.
It was very beautiful.
I love it so much.
Set to a 40s song, and it was, mwah.
Yes.
I loved it.
Yes.
It was perfect.
Okay, so with that said, in context of everything else, where you rated Captain America at a 4, and season 1 of Agent Carter at a 5, and I believe the one shot was at a... I don't remember what you rated the one shot at.
It's probably like 4 or 4.5.
Pretty close. What would you rate season 2 at?
Probably a 4. Because as much as there were parts in it that I really liked especially that there were more women characters around and every one of them had their own personality. I liked a lot of their writing. I liked how we got to see more of Peggy's backstory. We got to see more development with her. I also like, again, how... Well, I liked most of the men's writing. Not all of them, but I especially liked that we had that callback moment where Jack and Daniel are both like, do as Peggy says.
It was beautiful, even if Jack does not take his own advice later.
I really loved how, Jarvis and Peggy had a fight. They made up. They had
like clear development through it.
Yes. And I like how their friendship is very much a friendship. I mean, I still kind of ship them, but now I, ship them with
the wife involved.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like, though, that in the show it's still mostly platonic. It's a very strong friendship. I like how, when Dottie was being tortured, she didn't buckle at a man doing it, but the minute Whitney came in there and fucked her up, she's screaming.
Well, it's because Whitney actually had the potential to kill her, not some random truth serum that she's been taught how to repress.
I liked that twist on there. I liked just there were a lot of moments I did like, but overall the reason that I downgraded it from 5 stars was because, I miss the noir tone, I miss the darker tone. There were a lot of silly moments that just didn't land for me, and it felt kind of out of place. I feel like as much as I wanted more Agent Carter, but like I said at the beginning, this isn't what I meant. I didn't want a season that really felt its length.
It really did. There were episodes in the middle that just... I wish that we could have not done so much with Whitney goes to make a deal with ex-shady guy.
Yeah. There's a difference...
We have another turn of Jack Thompson being a jerk. We get it.
There's a difference between having quiet moments and letting stuff rest, let it sit, let it sink in, or having character moments, and then there's a difference between dragging something out that really makes the pacing suffer for it, which is why I found it so ironic when you were talking about how, we couldn't bring Angie in because it would detract from the plot, and I'm like, there's plenty of other shit.
It's because they had too many side plots. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think they had too many side plots. They tried to tie it all to the major plot, but
if they were gonna do the whole rot within S.H.I.E.L.D. thing, I wish that they had done that in a season 3.
Yeah.
So that we could have closer tied that to the beginnings of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes, that would have been.
And you could have had those moral questions there without confusing that with everything else. I mean, you would have had to rewrite the council a little differently, but you still could have done that, and you still could have connected it back to S.H.I.E.L.D. You could have connected it back to Zola, but that season 3 doesn't exist, and we'll never know.
No, we won't.
On that note, I'd probably rate it about the same, because I feel like it is a significant downgrade. I didn't dislike any parts of it. It just felt a little slow in places in comparison.
And there's a way for you to actually do LA noir without making it all fucking brown and overexposed lighting like Brian De Palma's Black Dahlia. There's a way to do it.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Brian De Palma, but that movie looks very ugly at times. There's a way you can film LA in the 40s and make it not either look too TV showy or look like that.
If they'd just done some more of the lighting tricks that they started doing in, like, episode 6 onward, would have been great, because you actually started getting the blind reflections on people's faces, or the Dutch angles, or the weird basement lighting with, like, the strong contrast. You still could have done that throughout the rest of the show, and it still probably would have felt a little more tonally consistent.
Hell, like I just said in the Black Dahlia, like, there were moments when Brian De Palma actually managed that. Did the exact kind of noir lighting that we would have loved. But it's like this show went too far in making everything very bright, colorful, sunny California shit.
Which, on the other hand, like, I loved, because I loved Peggy's extra costumes.
Yeah, I loved her costumes, but again, I feel like there is a way to make it... There's a middle ground there.
It just wasn't quite as stylistic as I would have liked it. It felt a little too Marvel at this point. Yeah, it lost a little bit of the sparkle that it had from season 1.
Yeah. It really benefited from being more like a noir show.
Yeah, and I do wish it had been a little tighter, and if we were just going to consistently do a lot of what we did with Thompson, I wish that he had not shown up for several episodes, like you have him in the first one, and then don't have him show up again until he's relevant later in the show, because a lot of it was just constant, oh, he's doing the same thing again. Oh, we've already been through this character arc with him, and it felt like a retread of ground we didn't need to retread.
Like, Jack, you are not the guy to be doing 3D chests here. You're really not.
I get
or
his
4D chess.
I get
You're
his
not that guy.
Yeah, I get his insecurity around Peggy, who's now being seen as competent, and they're talking about her like she's a boxer, and he never got talked about like that, and whatever. Like, I get it, but at the same time, it's like, do we really need to go over this again?
It is. It's literally a retread of what we already went through in season 1 with him.
I find it more offensive than honestly reusing Tony Stark's arc for Howard.
Yeah. At least with Howard, you get to see him more as a character rather than just like, this cameo guy that you see in some of these movies. Versus Jack Thompson literally having a nice arc in the first season where he actually has genuine development, is not so much a Chad anymore. And then you go into season 2 and it's like 1 step forward, 4 steps back.
Yeah, he's back to being the same token chauvinist because we needed one this season, I guess.
I mean, yes, his dickishness is consistent, but...
Yeah, but I thought we developed beyond that.
But you're also handing him the idiot ball on top of that, which makes it really insufferable at times.
Especially when you get to the end of the show and he's suddenly super smart again. And I'm like, but why did you not figure this out earlier, dude?
Yeah, bro, you're not really that smart.
Yeah, so that's where my rating sits for it. So we're both at a 4. It was good. Could have been better. We wished it had been a little better, and we don't really understand why it gets a bad rap and why it got suddenly canceled.
I mean, I can understand people wanting the writing to be tighter, because if it had just been another season of 8 episodes and the writing were tighter, yeah, my rating would probably be higher. I still wish we could have gotten a last season just to have everything else wrap up, but no, I don't think it was nearly... I mean, I'm glad I finally watched it. I was putting it off for so long because people really
lay into it, and it didn't feel near as bad as everything I'd been told about it, which was that it ended on this terrible cliffhanger. It had this terrible love triangle in it.
Well, I mean, I guess if you care about Jack, it is a terrible cliffhanger.
I guess, but who cares about Thompson? On that note...
Clearly, there's some people that
somebody must. But on that note, Thank you for listening to this episode of FANSPLAINED. If you enjoy what we do, consider donating on our new Ko-fi. Everything we make goes right back into the production quality of the show, from equipment to our future website and more. We appreciate all of our subscribers and everything you do, and we're thankful from anything from Hulk smashing that like button to your questions and comments on each episode and sharing the show with your friends if you enjoyed it. Fansplained is a weekly media criticism and deep dive podcast, and we are still currently working our way through the chronological order of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Next week, we'll be looking at 2019's space adventure Captain Marvel. You can find our updates here on YouTube, as well as on Twitter and Ko-fi at Fansplained. If you want more of our conversation on the MCU and other fandoms, you can subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for new episode notifications. Until next time, Salt Shakers, this has been Ryan
and Em
with the Fansplained podcast, and we'll see you next week.